Welcome to Economics in 5 Minutes, where we cover in 5 minutes what you might see in a typical chapter of an economics book. Today, episode 2, we're going to be looking at supply and demand. This is a demand schedule. Demand schedules compare the price of a particular good to the quantity of the good demanded at these prices. This is read as if the price of a cup of coffee is $4, then consumers demand 1 cup. If the price is $3, consumers demand 2, and so on. These points can be plotted on a graph where quantity demanded is on the horizontal axis and price of the good is on the vertical axis. Connecting these points gives a curve of this shape, known as the demand curve. The law of demand states that such curves are usually downward sloping, unsurprisingly, because you generally want more of a good at a lower price. Now, an endogenous variable is one that appears on the axis of a graph. In the case of the demand curve, the endogenous variable are the quantity and price of the good the demand curve refers to, not the quantity and price of any other good. In the last example, the good in question would be coffee. An exogenous variable, in contrast, is any variable that affects the curve, but does not appear on the axes. If there is a change in an endogenous variable, usually for the demand curve it's price that changes, we have movement along the curve, or change in quantity demanded. Here, if the price goes down from $4 to $3 of whatever good is in question, we move along the curve from 4 to 3, as you can see, and we arrive at a point which represents a higher quantity. As such, we have an increase in quantity demanded. Were we to go backwards from 3 to 4, we would have a decrease in quantity demanded. If an exogenous variable changes, we have a shift in the demand curve or a change in demand. If the change causes a decrease in demand, we have a leftward shift of the curve as seen in the graph here. Contrastingly, if we have a change that increases demand, we have a rightward shift of the curve. One such exogenous variable is the price of substitutes. With substitutes, you're perfectly willing to exchange one for the other, and you don't need both at the same time to be happy. An example might be Cheetos and Doritos. If a good substitute increases in price, you'd buy more of the good in question, since it's comparatively cheaper, and the demand curve for the good shifts to the right. If, on the other hand, the good substitute decreases in price, you buy more of the substitute, and the demand curve for the good shifts to the left. Complements, in contrast to substitutes, are goods that go together. An example is hot dogs and hot dog buns. If the price of a good's complement increases, demand for the good in question will go down, since consuming the good with its complement is more expensive. Conversely, if the price of a good's complement decreases, consuming the good with its complement is cheaper, so demand will shift to the right. Tastes can also influence demand. If there is a favorable change in taste, for example, if people like Cheetos more because they are found to cure cancer, demand shifts right. If, on the other hand, Cheetos are found to cause cancer, demand shifts left. Expectations influence demand. If consumers expect a good to become more expensive in the future, they will demand more of the good now to get lower prices. Conversely, if consumers expect that a good will become cheaper in the future, they will demand less now and instead hold out for lower prices. In addition, an increase in the number of consumers will increase demand, while a decrease in the number of consumers will do the opposite. This is a supply schedule. It's much like a demand schedule, but it compares the quantity supplied by producers at a given price. The points here can be plotted and connected to form the supply curve as shown. The law of supply states that the supply curves are generally upward sloping because you generally want to sell more of a good at a higher price. Just as in the case for demand, changes in endogenous variables constitute a movement along the curve, while changes in exogenous variables constitute a shift of the curve. Input prices affect supply. Higher input prices lead to more costly production and a leftward shift of the supply curve, while lower input prices mean less costly production and a rightward shift of the supply curve. Further, improved technology leads to a higher supply since production is more efficient with better tech. Expectations also affect supply. If the price of the good in question is expected to rise in the future, suppliers will hold out for future higher prices and produce less now. Conversely, suppliers will produce more now and shift supply rightward if they believe that prices will fall in the future. Finally, more suppliers mean more supply and vice versa. The market equilibrium occurs where supply and demand intersect. As you can see here, this is at P star and Q star, and this is where society will produce and consume. The equilibrium is affected by changes in supply and demand. As you can see here, if demand increases, we move from this point to this point, and this point has a higher price and a higher quantity than we had before. Conversely, if we have a decrease in supply, then we go from this point to this point, where we have a lower quantity and a higher price. Now, sometimes demand and supply shift simultaneously. And in this case, if we have an increase in demand and a decrease in supply, we know definitely that price increases as seen here. But we don't know how quantity is affected because we don't know how supply changes relative to demand. And in fact, if we have a simultaneous shift of supply and demand, we will always know for a fact that one of either price or quantity will change definitely in one direction, but we won't know how the other one will change. If you liked what you saw today, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the notification bell. Thanks y'all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.